Hi, I did my paper on child sexual abuse from children ages 3 to 7. Um, some were a little younger in the research. So there is no shortage of abuse issues and concerns about children across the globe in every culture. Um, every 9 minutes, just about every agency said this, every 9 minutes, authorities respond to a report of child sexual abuse here in our nation, and that's not including the globe, which it is an international problem. So, nine is and needs to be exponential. I couldn't find every country, so I just stated ours. Um, the warning signs and the manifestations, the psychosocial issues followed by treatment are a long process before the damage can begin to heal in our children. The research revealed that this is a global problem that deserves addressing and acquiring some successful change in the way we do things now. More than imaginable, child sexual abuse goes undetected a lot of times, and that is a tragic thing, to consider. Children are resilient. They tend to adapt to their surroundings and what's going on with them. They just deal with it. They don't really know how not to deal with it until they have a way. Um, a single occurrence can have grave consequences for the victim, and the longer the abuse persists, the problem um, can last a lifetime. Sometimes it's just one time, and sometimes it's 1 year, and sometimes it's um, up until a child is a teenager that they've been hurt. I think that everyone that has something to do with a child, and the researchers agree, should be briefed on the subject, educated, and on the signs and the symptoms. And, you know, there needs to be a way for us to be able to help these children. Um, there is a child centered interview that they have about, bad touch, good touch. If anyone touches you inappropriately, find a safe person to tell. But it's done in the same way, as you'll find out later, the same way through these forensic investigations, which is, basically interrogating a child for hours and hours, which is way beyond their ability to be able to handle it. They're frightened enough about what happened. Research indicated that children between 3 and 8 have suffered child sexual abuse in the past, have interviewed through forensic interview style. It is broadly understood that children have cognitive, social, developmental, and language limitations at that age further hamper their ability and willingness to disclose the abuse. You know, that's just a lot, for a child to go through. Due to the environment of a forensic interview instead of a safe therapeutic environment interview, such as child centered play therapy, which will be discussed later, uh, these kids don't really have a safe place to talk about it. And if it means anything, the forensic interview is after someone's been caught or after something major happens. How do we address it to talk about it before, right? Well, it's kind of a taboo situation. Don't talk about that, and that turns into more hurt for the child, because people don't want to talk about, child sexual abuse. Research in the past has failed to address the child's ability to tell a story using dolls, because they said they use Bobo dolls in these forensic interviews, and they say don't use the toy. They're not toys. They're not for make believe. You can't play with them. And as I've researched and learned in class, that child's play is symbolic, and toys are the words, and play is the language. So you're really cutting yourself at a deficit here with children's abilities to verbalize their experience are often compromised by feelings of shame, embarrassment, perpetrator threats, and family pressure not to tell. So, with that kind of pressure, they're not really going to tell in this forensic interviews type of style. So, um, investigations can be exhausting and stressful for children, and their families. They do not foster a safe place for a child to narrate what's going on with them. Children are willing to tell you what's going on if you're willing to meet them where they are and allow them to talk about it. So in this situation, this could prove to be a crucial and beneficial place to introduce child-centered play therapy, considering it is evidence-based and aiding in children in a healing process, and allows the child to tell a story with the universal language of play using toys. The forensic interviews underestimated play in their search for success. So, I think that as I was looking through correlating child sexual abuse and matching it with client-centered, child-centered play therapy, I was hoping to find that they had, that they made the ends meet. That's what I was looking for the ends to meet. And I never did find that. I did a great deal of research, and I found that that child-centered play therapy actually it covers all of the symptoms of child sexual abuse, and we'll get more into that. Play therapy got its notoriety much before its time. Great-minded philosophers such as Aristotle and Plato discovered the fundamentals of play long before play therapy itself was a major discovery as a logical, reasonable, and statistically proven way to reach a child by meeting them where they are instead of having the unrealistic expectation for them to meet you where you are. That puts a child at a deficit. They don't have the language. It's a barrier because they don't know the words. They don't know. How is a child going to explain that to you? I mean, seriously. Play is an intentionally understood language of children. So if, that has to be for more than just, children. Or certified play therapists can't be the only people in the world. They have this cornerstone of, hey, we're the only ones that know that play is going to help us get the information that we may need from a child. So you might be able to use it in some type of the interview, but then what about, helping a child heal from all of these things, So as I go on, research supported a well-trained play therapist can help a child develop better self-esteem and thus better assuredness about their abilities. Research also supported that effectiveness of play therapy with children experiencing a wide variety of social, emotional, behavior, and learning problems, including children with disabilities. So those are all the symptoms of child sexual abuse. So I never could find someone to say child sexual abuse and child-centered therapy worked. But the more research I did, the more the ends were meeting. The research shows that it would help. It's just that there's not enough empirical research to actually say, yes, we've researched this. It doesn't. Gosh, would I love to do this. Love to do a dissertation on this. It would be to the advantage of everyone to use child-centered play therapy. It's proven to work with, all the same symptoms. And depending on the severity, I didn't know this, depending on the severity of the symptoms, which, child sexual abuse is probably going to be a little more traumatic than maybe your parents getting a divorce. I don't know. I don't want to sound judgmental, but I mean, it seems like that would be a trauma perpetrated on you instead of a trauma you have to go through, so it seems like it would be more. So they do have intense child-centered play therapy. More cases, there were no signs There are also signs of nonverbal that go unnoticed. Some signs consist of hidden physical trauma and the genital area. This is for child sexual abuse, sexually transmitted infections caused by intercourse. Some of the other behavioral signs manifest in forms of hypersexuality, bedwetting, and bed soiling. For some children, a close attachment to a caregiver, holding on just way too tight, and emotional cues can appear in excessive knowledge about sexual conduct, regressive behaviors, nightmares, fears. There's so many things that child sexual abuse has caused in children, and ways of dealing with it have taken a lifetime to figure out, what are we going to do, with this, with this problem. And it astonishes me that we have not married these two. Okay. I know that, everything aligns with what, what it's asking for, which is, if you look at this, it says this, and maybe it did, maybe because child sexual abuse is so taboo. Maybe they really didn't talk about it, or maybe, because it is therapy, and it wasn't, maybe the children that, went through it, their parents didn't want any research done on it. So maybe that's what happened. I really didn't find anything like connecting it. I just found a lot of research connecting it to the symptoms it causes. The research also indicated that one of the biggest problems in child sexual abuse may not be addressed until a child shows signs. Okay, so this time is, if we don't look at things, or we don't look at the nonverbal signs, sometimes it doesn't even get caught and dealt with until the child's older. So then, that's definitely a barrier too for children dealing with this. So this was, children had been, in some of the research, children had been in police reports, fondled, exposed to adult genitals, witnessed masturbation and ejaculation of adult males. This was the children's testimonials. Some of the cases had no testimony from a child due to language barriers because of their age. Their parents and therapists talked about it. So that must be very hurtful too for children to, for parents to have to talk about that. This poses the idea for child-centered play therapy as a tool to reveal such abuse. If the abuse did occur, this child has a safe environment to bridge the large gap between what happened and how they understand what happened. It also gives them a language that they understand and narrate the events and process them. Certified play therapists use children's natural symbolic play as a method of mental health treatment. The main belief in child-centered play therapy is that all children possess everything they need to self-actualize, which is what can be used to move them forward beyond the internal pain and trauma. The children may not have the words, but are provided a safe, therapeutic environment containing universal language that they understand, and toys as words, and they're given empathy and genuineness and unconditional positive regard. They can find the power within themselves to heal, from the trauma and the behavioral issues, because child sexual abuse does not just cause traumatic symptoms. It causes acting out behaviors as well, which child-centered has also been known to really work well with. There's research that backs it up. It's evidence-based. Parents and teachers reported that child-centered play therapy showed significant decreases in aggression, increases in self-regulation. Now, is that a mouthful? I mean, that's a whole lot of, okay, so you're going to find aggression, whether it's passive or not. You're going to find some aggression in the child sexual abuse, and, self-regulation. Children are not going to know what to do with those very deep emotions like that. So it's going to come out in all these different symptoms that it says that the research showed that child-centered play therapy is going to work for. So therefore, I'd love to see more research on this to see, I'd love to see, more research of the exacts of what it is. Therapy, child-centered play therapy is a developmentally appropriate and responsive intervention since children communicate best through play. Trust and safety are key when dealing with the young children that have suffered trauma. Their thoughts and feelings drive their behaviors and in and out of the playroom. The relationship the child's build with a therapist is key. So these therapists are not forensic interviewers. They're not forcing the child. They're not taking all one interview, 3 or 4 hours of interrogating this child to try and find out what's going on. What's also not good is because of the way it is and because it is deemed inconclusive in these forensic interviews for what happened to a child when they're trying to investigate. They're not, I'm trying to think of the word. I'm not looking at it. But they're not, judges do not look at them as evidence, for lack of a better way of saying it. I wrote it better in here somewhere. But judges are not, that's not evidence to a judge because it's known how these things are done and how things are construed. The one thing that I noticed in the videos that I watched and in all of the research, children and child-centered play therapy are not coerced to give you a story. They're going to give you a story as it's laid out, how they understand it, but there's definitely going to be no, you're not going to have to investigate what the child meant by the story they narrate for themselves. And I find that fascinating. The therapist must be genuine, consistent, provide necessary, unconditional positive regard in this modality of treatment. Allowing the child to direct the sessions provides a needed space to process their own time. Just said that, okay? They shared a philosophy, the study showed that families receiving community-based services were receiving child-centered play therapy in one of the studies, and the positive experience with their children. They shared a philosophy particularly regarding respecting children's natural pace of developmental and healing. Parents also like the relationship building skills and behavioral outcomes of their children, and that groups facilitated. So this can happen individually and it can happen in a group. I think that for some of the deep trauma and the intense trauma, it probably would, the group may be later, but, sitting here and I was thinking about lots of stuff as I'm going through it. I'm thinking, you can heal the child to a place where then you can maybe, I didn't find any research on this, but it stands to reason that maybe some filial, did I say that right, child play therapy would work because the parents like the way that the therapists were teaching them to engage with their children, but it was like an engagement that they had not done before. It wasn't like trying to coerce them to talk to or come tell mommy something. They were taught behaviors that would make their child comfortable enough to engage with them. And, if you've ever been a parent, you want your child to engage with you. Do they most of the time? No, maybe play therapist children engage with them, but mine's 24 and he still doesn't engage with me, not in a way that I would like him, to. Let's just say that. So I love this. This was explained to me. I didn't know this, but this is why, when you're considering the way children tell you about what happened or heal from what happened is usually the way that we have seen, the way that we think that it should happen in therapy. And the children through play therapy have told you that this is the way they heal. And I love that because it's child-centered. So the child is telling you, we're not telling the child, and it's not directed. So individual play therapy is a 4-stage treatment modality. The first stage is a warm-up stage, and the child builds a rapport with a therapeutic relationship is formed. Trust is built, which establishes safety and security needed to begin the process for the trauma, to process the trauma or behavior. Stage 2 is aggressive stage where the child and therapist establish limits. They're going to try to push. All kids are going to do that. I love that, though, that there's actually a stage that gets you through this, and then, the therapist is going to establish the boundaries of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So that's going to, not direct a child, but at least give them a boundary upon which they're going to, be in this environment, and they're going to work on these things. Okay. So, then stage 3 is a regressive stage where the attachment is explored and the child exhibits more nurturing behaviors, but may regress a little chronologically within the realm of play. Stage 4 is known as the mastery stage, where where you're in the final stage and there's some lessons that were learned and some behavioral modifications that might have been put into through the child, teaching you what's going on with them. And I didn't really they didn't go deep enough for me to find out, like, I want to know if it's child-centered, how would all of that have, fit in together. But this is where the child starts to master what they've learned and discovered and revealed in therapy, to move on into a healing phase, hopefully. You don't want to assume anything, but hopefully. During this stage, children begin to master the skills to become more competent and build confidence and move forward. And this research was noted that the best option for treating trauma in young children 2 to 7, which that's where that's what, all of my research was based on. Research also provided evidence to children that I love this, okay, because I did a paper on this, on adverse childhood experiences. Research also provided evidence that children that score high on adverse childhood experience questionnaires from pediatrician's office annual visits do well with treatment and child-centered play therapy. This means that a child has been exposed to 2 or more trauma-related incidents more than 50% of the time. At least one of the ACEs is a child sexual abuse related. With young children, the doctors recommend that child-centered play therapy, because it is considered developmentally appropriate treatment modality for young children who have experienced 2 or more ACEs. The pediatricians share the idea that CCPT does not seem to traumatize the child further, which I find great too, that if the child is moving at their pace, telling you how they want, you're not further forcing the child into a more traumatizing situation. And, adverse childhood experiences was done by an insurance company in California, and they wanted to know, how can we find out what's going on? How can we find out pre what's going on? So I love that you figure out these questionnaires and then you start early, and then you're not really waiting for the perpetrator to get caught, and you're healing the child and what is in the child and being there for the child, and you sort of know something's going on by the questionnaires. So then there was one more thing that I found that through serious trauma that they were using. It was called release play therapy. It is a form of individual play therapy known for its effectiveness when treating trauma in children, mainly violence. Research showed the value of child using his methods of treating him or herself by given the opportunity to reenact traumatic experiences through play, allowing the child to process the trauma at their rate, but a little more directed, understanding without being hurried or pushed. The concept of you know what? I don't even really know how to say this word. ABREA, abreaction, which is the expression of emotionally discharged of unconscious material, showed the best results in the research. Okay, so this means it's like psychoanalytic. It's like trying to, you're letting the child go at their pace, but you're directing a little bit to try and uncover what the unconscious is in order to bring it to the conscious, and then, start working on the treatment. So I found that, that was psychoanalytic. And I do remember working in class that we had some psychoanalytic stuff that they talked about, but we didn't talk about the application of that. So I found that very interesting, and I went ahead and put that This was based on a strong drive of human need to recreate an experience, and then they better able to assimilate it. Children, just like adults, have the same need to work out trauma that they've experienced. Young children are at a deficit without the knowledge of language. RPT affords the child the opportunity to process the trauma using language of play and the words as toys. This is just another way of using play therapy to have a child narrate a traumatic experience by bringing the unconscious memory to the conscious through suggestion. That was very I'd be interested in seeing how that worked out, how to help a child bring an unconscious memory to the conscious with with that would be, I would love to see the process of that. But it's evidence-based as well for treating trauma with children. There's another imminent concern with child abuse is peer-on-peer abuse. And there really wasn't any research on these children being treated, but I thought it worthy to put in the paper because, warn you, this is going to be a little bit graphic, but I just believe it's important. A 7-year-old said a 5-year-old was crying with a very matter-of-fact tone. The other case in the study indicated the 5-year-old little girl was a victim of abuse herself, and she was, the 7-year-old was a victim herself, and she was forcing a 5-year-old to do sexual things that, are less than desirable, and so that child was being perpetrated on too, and the other child only did it because that was being done to them. There was another little boy in kindergarten. He was on in the playground, and he was telling children to suck his body part, and when they didn't, he punched them as hard as he could in the stomach. Now, he used the wording as hard as he could. They have that in quotation. So that says that, someone must have been doing that to him. And so he thought that if I can't get you to do that to me, then I'm going to punch you in the stomach. So it's almost like someone was doing that to him. So, this is growing, this peer-on-peer sexual abuse. It's taboo. No one wants to talk about it, but, it's a little more than play and doctor when you were younger. This means that the abuse of one child caused the abuse of another child. It's a rippling effect, and it's very frightening. It was stated that the matter is fragile and complex, which is just another word of expressing that it's taboo. This is something worth addressing and introducing the thought of child-centered play therapy to reveal the problem and also treat the problem, since it is thought to not further traumatize the child. So, I know there was a lot of information to digest, but I got really caught up in studying this. It fascinated me, and I thought, wow, this is really cool stuff. So child sexual abuse is a worldwide problem, seems to be growing in size, but also growing in awareness. Talking about it regularly, educating parents, doctors, and professionals can transfer the taboo subject into a great preventative maintenance plan to help the children and lessen the abuse percentages. More research needs to be done in the correlation between child sexual abuse and child-centered play therapy, like as using the verbiage of those things to make them meet. But I still believe with everything I have in me that I've done enough research to prove that this would be amazing in this subject. Pediatricians are on board because it's an immediate, you can immediately start treating the child without further traumatizing them, and all they have to do is go into a playroom and start telling you the story behind what they have going on. And what better way to help a child than to validate the way that they want to tell you the story, which is the most fascinating thing I find about play therapy. This also could do some, I'd love to see some research done for for how it's presented in court, because it's not really fair that the child is, in these forensic interviews, when they want to investigate what's going on, that they pressure these children and then don't find that it really works in court. So if a child can tell me what's going on with them and they can give me the story, I think that, that validates the story enough. If you meet them where they are and don't force them or interrogate them or investigate them for hours to meet you where you are when they are traumatized, that's further traumatizing the child. And so I appreciate it. Sorry it's so long, but I couldn't shorten it any. It was absolutely fascinating to do this paper, and I really enjoyed it. I hope that you enjoyed the information that I shared with you. Thank you.